There are no words. So last time we looked at the 2070 Super, which, if you can find it at MSRP, it's about $100 more than the 5700 XT, give or take. And we're still waiting on AIB partner versions, like we've got the AMD versions with the blower fans, which nobody really likes. I don't think the blower is all that terrible, to be honest, but these are shockingly quiet. I've got the MSI 2080 Super. And the 2080 Super, this is just, it's like, oh, are we doing the comparison? It's like 350 versus a 750, 770-ish card? I don't know. There's not really a comparison there. The MSI 2080 Super. The reason that I like this card, other than it's fast and can play a lot of games at about 60 FPS at 4K, and it doesn't cost $1,200, is that it's very quiet. Oh, by the way, this is the MSI Gaming X Trio, the 2080 Super Edition. If you saw our 2070 Super review, physically, there's not really a lot of differences between these cards. In fact, I'm kind of hard-pressed to tell a difference between them physically. The 2080 Super does have quite a few differences than the 2080, or from the 2080 Ti, which launched kind of a while ago now. Now, the 2080 Super from MSI has done an amazing job putting this card together. The cooler is amazing. It comes with this support bracket thing, which will, hold up the card and make sure that it doesn't sag, depending on what sort of a sag situation that you're dealing with. Me, personally, I like 3D printing stuff to hold it up, but that's just me. It's a weird spot, though, that NVIDIA is sort of putting people in. Or maybe it's another Jebaited from AMD, I don't know. We've got the 5700 XT and the 5700 Anniversary Edition, which is up to like 10.5 teraflops. It's a very powerful card. It's a very good deal, the 5700 XT, at around $399. It's very, very playable at 1440p, and AMD's relatively unique upscaling technology that we took a look at is actually quite good and different than DLSS. And in fact, it's open source, so some crazy person, good job crazy person, has actually ported that upscaling technology to NVIDIA. So you can use that on an NVIDIA card, although you gotta jump through some hoops and it's not quite as easy as a toggle on the AMD side. But this is a $700 to $800 card at the time that I'm recording this. When I recorded the video for the 2070 Super, it was about $100 more than an XT, 5700 XT. And the performance was pretty close. So the performance here, if we look, and we with the 2080 Super, so is it going to be as good as a 2080 Ti? Well, you probably already know, but the answer is no. It's not, but it is better than a 2080. So 8 gigs of GDDR memory. This is the fastest, like in terms of like how fast is the memory. This card has the fastest video memory of anything that I've tested. So if you're doing some type of compute workload with CUDA and you need insanely fast memory, there you go. Well, except for HBM. I guess HBM would be faster, but off GPU memory, you pedantic folks, it's fine. Let's take a look at synthetic benchmarks first. So first up, we've got FireStrike. A 2080 is about 26,376, and the 2080 Ti is about 27,599. Now this is all on the same system. So the 2080 Super is right in the middle, 27,230. It's not really a lot of difference between the 2080 Super and the 2080 Ti for FireStrike. It's an artificial benchmark. It's really not the best, but just to give us an idea that the systems are actually working correctly, it's sort of fun to run that and see how that goes. There's also TimeSpy. And so TimeSpy, the 2080 Ti is quite a bit higher. The 2080 Super and the 2080 perform almost identically. So this is still 8 gigs of GDDR6. The 2080 Ti is 11 gigs. Maybe that's the performance difference between 14,000 and 10,000. 10,674, not a lot faster than 10,377. Now, maybe that's because of the Ryzen test system that I was using, but I don't know. I mean, because you get a little bit more single thread on the Intel side of things, just a hair. But some other games seem to benefit a little bit from Ryzen. It's got sort of margin of error. Let's take a look at Final Fantasy 15 first too, because Final Fantasy 15 is actually kind of a terrible benchmark. But I've had enough people message me and say, hey, can you see if there's some kind of a difference between the Final Fantasy 15 benchmark on like the 5700 XT and the 9900K CPU and, you know, like a 3900X CPU, and I don't know. So I'm poking at that. So far, looks like margin of error, but you know, spoiler alert. But 2080 Ti 7219 versus 5736 for the 2080 Super versus 5097 for the 2080. That's a 4K. Monster Hunter World, there's a minor performance uplift. We go from 50 to 57 FPS on the 3900X or 51 to 54 FPS on the 9900K. And this is perhaps the best example. So doing a bunch of runs, it's very close to margin of error, but it seems as though the 3900X is doing a better job at higher resolutions than the 9900K, just by a frame or two here and there. I can't conclusively call it and say, yes, absolutely, without question, the 3900X is handling higher resolution better than the 9900K. But it is enough to make me sort of say, that's interesting. And the 5700 XT, also from our previous benchmarks, sort of showed this same pattern where it's like, it's almost margin of error. I don't want to really call it. But here, you know, we've got a 3 FPS difference, and this was repeatable across runs. But, you know, we've got the 50 to 51 FPS between the 9900K and the 3900X. Maybe that's margin of error, like plus or minus 3 FPS, but, you know, the variance was there, so I don't know. Shadow of the Tomb Raider, we go from 63 to 68 FPS at 4K, 62 to 66 FPS at 4K. That's the 9900K and the 3900X. It's a pretty decent uplift. I do like to see that it's, you know, with a lot of games, and this is the high preset, not the highest preset, but the high preset. I do like to see that a lot of games are getting on the other side of 60 FPS at 4K. I figure that that's what NVIDIA was shooting for. It's like, you know, high, medium high, highest. You can have a 60 FPS 4K gaming experience with the 2080 Super, because before, you know, $1,200-$1,300 was a lot to cough up for the 2080 Ti to have a good 4K gaming experience. And the 4K gaming experience on the 5700 XT, which is a fraction of the price here, was much better with the upscaling, the AMD upscaling, the resolution enhancement thingy, so that you're running at native resolution, but it's, you know, content adaptive sharpening. That actually worked shockingly well and didn't really hurt FPS. And so playing it, you know, 4K, which is really upscaled 1440p on that card, was very, very high frame rate at a fraction of the cost of this, like half. A little more than half, but half-ish. So I'm hoping that AIB partners are able to squeeze a little bit more performance out of it. I don't know. Tom Clancy's Wildlands was sort of a weird one. 51 to 54 FPS and 52 to 53 FPS. Again, the 3900X is eking out a little bit better frame rate with the 2080 Super for whatever reason. And it's repeatable because it's like, this has got to be margin of error. It's like, all right, let's get out the car. Let's just run through another set of tests here with the same setup, same memory. You know, these are so close. It's annoying because, you know, you run these tests and you think, oh, this is fine. And then you run the tests again because they're so close. So kind of annoying. I'm surprised that Tom Clancy's Wildlands did not see more of a performance uplift at 4K. 1440p, it's a little different story, but 4K, it would have been nice to get Wildlands over 60 FPS. Now, you can't play with the quality settings and get that dialed in and be fine. The 2080 Ti just barely is over 60 FPS at 4K, but, you know, again, this is the in-game preset graphics, so what are you gonna do? We also tested SpecView Perf just for fun, so that's sort of testing 3ds Max and Katya and Crayon, Energy and Maya, and Medical and Showcase and SNX and SW. And again, the 2080 Super is right between the 2080 and the 2080 Ti. There's not really anything where it's super close to the 2080 Ti, except maybe Katya. Katya is a little closer to the 2080 Ti end of things than the 2080, so, you know, that's nice if you need that for your workload, but by and large, there's not really, so, I mean, I don't want to call it disappointing, but the 2080 Super could have had a little bit more performance. I mean, this MSI card, this 2.5 slot, 3 fan monster, is unbelievable. It's quiet, it runs relatively cool, it's overclockable. You can get about another 6 to 8% out of this card if you overclock it. There's going to be some variability there. One thing that was very surprising is MSI left the 250 watt power limitation in place. At least it's on mine, and I'm not sure if that's, this is from MSI. They sent this. This one's not retail. So I'm not sure if that's something that will persist on the press side of things, or if that was just an oversight from an early sample. But from what I'm seeing on the rest of the internet, I think the 250 watt limitation is probably probably there, because of the design and not because of an oversight. So that's probably intentional. I feel like this cooler in this setup probably would be overclockable a little bit more were it not for the power limitation, just because this cooler is so ridiculous. So it's a really odd situation, the 2080 Super. It is nice that the price hasn't really changed, although right now I guess a lot of people are buying it because the price is higher. But are people really spending that much on their graphics card? I mean, if I were going to buy a graphics card and I wanted a fast but shockingly quiet graphics card and money didn't really matter to a point, that's sort of where this is. And that's kind of what's going on with the TVs. It's like, it's Green Ranger versus Green Ranger. There's really only 3 kinds of stories. Man versus man, man versus nature, man versus himself. And in this case, I think it's a little bit of NVIDIA versus themselves. I mean, the 2080 Super has probably been waiting in the wings for a while just to see what happens. And so if the 5700 XT is all we're going to see from AMD, then okay. But now that the 2080 Super is out, there's probably, I don't know. Is there a 2080 Ti waiting in the wings? Is there something better from AMD coming down the road? Because, we've got usually, think about the Polaris launch. 560, 570, 580. Now we have the 5700, 5700 XT, and the anniversary edition 5700. Are we going to see a 5800? Is the 5800 going to be more performance? How much more performance? Are the AIB partners going to be able to clear that 2 gigahertz barrier that we see on the 5700 XT and even get that much more performance, sort of taking the wind out of the sails of the 2070 Super a little bit? I mean, yeah, the 5700 XT is a little slower than the 2070 Super, but the price difference, it's not worth it to a lot of people. The 2080 Super is markedly faster than a 2080. But it's not close enough to a 2080 Ti that I think it makes everybody happy, because the 1080 Ti launched, and that was a monster card. That was unbelievable. If you got a, especially like a used minor 1080 Ti for like $500-600, you're fine. That's still the deal of the century. That's an incredible card. And so that's another way that NVIDIA kind of is competing with itself. Of course, I guess NVIDIA would rather you buy a used card than an AMD card so that AMD gets some traction in the market. But it really is an interesting time to be alive. I mean, AMD is getting a lot of traction in the GPU market. In the middle of the market, the $300 to $400 GPU with the higher end stuff, it's pretty awesome. People are buying that. I do think that even though there's not really a lot of demand for the RTX and the ray tracing thing, I do kind of have to give it to NVIDIA. They're trying something. They're trying a new technology. They sort of recognize that people, beyond a certain point, and I don't know if that's 1440p or 4K or 6K or 5K or 8K or something else down the road, but beyond a certain point, resolution just doesn't matter as much as it used to. I spent hours and hours and hours playing Tomb Raider 2. If you look at those graphics today, it's like, 5 polygons. And so now playing Shadow of the Tomb Raider, I can't really tell a lot of difference between Shadow of the Tomb Raider and Rise of the Tomb Raider. Not as much as between Rise of the Tomb Raider and Tomb Raider 2, certainly. And so RTX is a new technology that will enable those kinds of game features. But the performance is not really there, unless you're playing Quake 2. If you're playing Quake 2, then RTX is really amazing. It's a lot of eye candy. But for me, it's not enough to convince me to pay $800 or $750-ish for a graphics card. If you were to ask me if the 2080 Super were a smart buy, I'd probably tell you no. But it's faster than the 2080. This particular design is quiet, fast. It's an interesting design. It's a 3-fan design. It works pretty well for overclocking, but there's a 250 watt power limit, which is kind of weird. So in summary, I would say if you're gonna buy a 2080 Super, you should take a look at this card. If you want, you can save some money and get close-ish performance, especially around 1440p and less. For 4K, it's not as fast as a 2080 Ti, but it also doesn't cost $1,200. And for just about every game, you can get it to a 60 FPS threshold, tweaking the settings and messing with, anti-aliasing or messing with texture quality and some other stuff. You can get it to a point where it's going to give you 60 FPS of 4K more consistently than a 2080. So if you want a budget card, budget in quotation marks there, a budget card for 4K 60 gaming, 2080 Super is probably a good fit, and especially this version of the 2080 Super, because you can basically max it out at the 250 watt limit. You can use the OC scanner and get to a point where this card is running solid, using as much power as it's allowed to consume, I guess, because of the power tables, because of NVIDIA or whatever, and get a little bit more performance, a few percentage points more performance, even than the graphs that I showed. So the graphs that we went through, they're stock performance, but you can get a little bit more out of it with the overclocking, but it's going to vary from card to card. So just do the math. It's about 3 to 6%, and a little more on the 3% than the 6%. Depends on title and some other things, but there's about as much variability between the 9900K and the 3900X, especially at higher resolutions. It's the other end of the bell curve. At lower resolutions favor the 9900K, so 1440 is kind of in the middle. It's a weird time to be alive. I'm Wendell, this is Level 1. This is a quick look at the 2080 Super from MSI. MSI did a great job. NVIDIA, I think, is confused. Like, if the whole debated thing is like actually legit a thing, I don't know. Maybe the pricing should have been more disruptive, although I guess they didn't want to price it less than a 2080. But MSRP and like actually being able to buy at MSRP, it's a little above MSRP. I don't know. I guess it's above MSRP because people are buying it, right? I mean, that's why that works. So it's weird. It's a weird time to be alive. I don't know what to tell you. Yeah.